Welcome to Hours of Service Rules for Property Carrying CMV Drivers. Hello drivers, I'm Victor. I've been on the road for the better part of 25 years, accident-free.
And I'm Nate. I'm well under 25 years on the road, so I'll be looking to learn today like many of you.
There's going to be a lot of information we're going to go over, and I'm sure I'll be able to pick up a few new tricks too. So Nate, any accidents in your time?
Thankfully, my other training has kept me from bending a bumper, or worse.
Nice. So listen up, folks. By the end of this program, you'll see the purpose of the Hours of Service regulations and the impact they have on your day-to-day operations.
You'll be able to explain and apply hours of service regulations, including on-duty limits, driving limits, and the 34-hour restart provision. In addition, we're going to help you become competent tracking your hours of service using an automatic onboard recording device, or AOBRD, an electronic logging device, or ELD, and let's not forget good old paper logs.
I'll show you old. Look, we all agree that safety is key, right? The purpose of the Hours of Service regulations and this video are obvious. We're trying to keep everyone on the road safe and compliant.
No joke, chances are you or someone you know has suffered some fatigue when behind the wheel. Fatigue can lead to bad decisions and potentially serious, if not deadly, crashes.
The federal regulations governing interstate commerce cover two areas. The first is hours of service. As you may expect, these are the number of hours drivers are allowed to drive or work in a defined time frame, and these hours must be accounted for. The second is the driver's daily log. Some of us veteran drivers might still call them grid logs, but I'm sure you already knew that, didn't you?
That sounds familiar. The regulations that are designed to protect drivers come from both federal and state agencies. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations are issued by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or FMCSA.
Keep in mind, many states also have hours of service requirements that go above and beyond the feds. It can be confusing from time to time because the federal regulations may or may not match the intrastate requirements. And it's up to drivers and motor carriers to keep current on all the regulations that apply to you, including hours of service for your specific operation. So, tell us, Nate, who's regulated?
Federal regulations for hours of service apply if your vehicle weighs or combination of vehicles is rated at 10,001 pounds or more. You also will be under hours of service regulations if you transport hazardous materials in quantities large enough to require placards.
Remember, the hazardous material regulation is in effect no matter what the vehicle you're driving weighs. If you're placarded, you're under HOS regulation. You're probably thinking that being on duty and being off duty is fairly easy to keep separate. The regulations are very specific and clear about where the line is drawn. Like we said before, we're trying to keep everyone on the road safe and compliant. So the regulations allow for only so much time for drivers to drive. Too much time on duty can result in fatigue, and that's why drivers and motor carriers must track all of their on-duty time. The regs define on-duty time as all time from the time a driver begins work or is required to be in readiness to work until the time the driver is relieved from work and all responsibility for performing work.
The definition of on-duty time includes waiting to be dispatched, inspecting, servicing, or conditioning a commercial motor vehicle.
Driving, which is further defined as time spent at the controls of a CMV in operation. Being in or on a CMV other than time spent resting in or on a parked vehicle.
Except, Vic, when attending to a commercial vehicle containing a Division 1.1, 1.2, or 1.3 explosive material.
That's right, Nate. On-duty time is also being in or on a CMV other than time spent resting in the sleeper berth, or being in or on a CMV other than up to 2 hours riding in the passenger seat of a CMV moving on a highway immediately before or after a sleeper berth period of at least 8 consecutive hours.
On-duty time also includes loading or unloading your commercial motor vehicle, repairing, obtaining assistance, or attending to a disabled CMV, complying with drug or alcohol testing requirements, and finally, performing any other work for your carrier or any compensated work for another employer.
The hours of service regs involve 4 maximum limits: the 14-hour on-duty limit, the 11-hour driving limit, the 60 or 70-hour on-duty limit, and the mandatory break provision or 8-hour driving limit. Let's take a closer look. To start with, you can drive or begin your shift only if you've been off duty for 10 consecutive hours. So let's say your company has you on duty at 6 a.m. That means you have to be off duty since 8 p.m. the night before. Got it?
Yep. Now, let's move on to our first regulation limit, the 14-hour on-duty limit. This limit means you can drive only during a period of 14 consecutive hours after coming on duty. If your company has you on duty at 6 a.m., your 14 consecutive hours ends at 8 p.m. Once you finish this 14-hour duty window, you can drive again only after you've been off duty for 10 consecutive hours or at 6 a.m. the following day.
And another thing to remember, Nate, is that the 14-hour period is consecutive and all-inclusive. In other words, it includes all on-duty and off-duty time you've accumulated since starting your shift.
Right. So, for example, stopping for lunch or taking a break doesn't extend the 14-hour limit. And the same goes for unforeseen events, such as a breakdown or having to wait for an extended period to load or unload your truck. Victor, you probably know some drivers have mistaken the 14-hour limit to mean their shift must end after 14 hours, but that's not the case. The hours of service rules only limit you from driving past 14 hours, not working past 14 hours.
To make sure you comply with the hours of service limits, you have to keep track of your hours of service. You do this with your daily log, which is also how law enforcement officers and the FMCSA know you're complying.
There's a lot of good information to cover, so let's start right in with the ELD mandate.
This was some big news. You might remember back in 2015, the FMCSA published the Electronic Logging Device and Supporting Documents Final Rule, but you probably know it as the ELD mandate. Basically, it required almost all drivers using paper logs or an AOBRD to switch over to an ELD by December 18, 2017. So Nate, what are the benefits of using an ELD?
Well, an ELD gets information from your vehicle's engine to automatically record your driving time. The good thing about this is it improves your ability to maintain compliance with the hours of service rules and makes it easier for you to keep your records.
That does sound a lot easier, but there's got to be a catch.
Well, Vic, you'll still need to keep at least 8 days of paper logs in your vehicle just in case the ELD malfunctions. If it does, you'll need to redo your current day's log as well as any logs from the previous 7 days as soon as you can.
That is true. If your ELD fails, you'll need to let your carrier know within 24 hours. You're required to maintain a paper log until it can be fixed or replaced, which needs to happen within 8 days of the malfunction. The same goes for if you're an owner-operator.
Let's take a step back and explain a little bit more about logging. Logging apps on mobile devices that are not synchronized with the engine cannot be considered an ELD or an AOBRD.
That's also true. They're just an electronic means of creating and printing a grid log. And again, the key is if they're not synchronized with your engine, they are not an ELD or an AOBRD.
This program has given you a good idea of how the hours of service regulations will impact your day-to-day operations. It goes back to what we said in the beginning. Making sure tired drivers are off the road keeps everyone safe. We can all agree safety and compliance are the keys to staying violation-free.
No one wants a citation, fine, or out-of-service order, and we especially don't want any of you involved in crashes or, even worse, someone losing their life. It's just not worth it to take chances. The best thing you can do is to know the hours of service rules and how to work within them. Stay in compliance, and most importantly, stay safe out there.